The committee will come to order. Good morning. As this is the first full committee hearing of the Senate Appropriations Committee in the 119th Congress, I would like to first take a moment to welcome back our returning members and to also welcome the new members of the committee. I'm very pleased to be joined once again at the helm of this committee by the senior senator from Washington, Vice Chair Murray. The topic for our first full committee hearing, biomedical research, keeping America's edge in innovation, is significant. It speaks to the high priority that this committee places on biomedical research. There is no investment that pays greater dividends to Americans' families than our investment in this research, which can lead to life-saving and life-enhancing discoveries. For more than 75 years, the United States has been the world leader in scientific research and technological innovation. We earned this position through the hard work of countless researchers and scientists and their staff, many of whom trusted their careers to the culture of science built by the American people. At the heart of that culture is the strategy coordinating grant-based research at university and private labs funded through the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy, and many other federal agencies. This strategy has been an enormous success. In the years following World War II, the U.S. emerged as the global leader in science and technology, accounting for 69% of global R&D across all fields by the year 1960. In biomedical research, the U.S. dominated the second half of the 20th century. During this period, our scientists based in the United States published 70% of the papers in the top-cited journals, secured the majority of the world's biomedical patents, and won more than half of the Nobel Prizes awarded in medicine. Stability is a key aspect of the American formula because it allows scientists to focus their work knowing that they will have the support they need to pursue and test their ideas from start to finish. The freedom to explore and collaborate is also crucial, especially to younger scientists who are eager to get into the lab and work on what inspires them. This combination has made the United States a, quote, irresistible magnet for researchers everywhere, as Dr. Haller, one of our witnesses, put it so well, drawing the best and the brightest from around the world. Their work demonstrates the value of the American system, leading to breakthroughs that save lives and restore health for so many. For example, over the past 20 years, the FDA has approved more than 600 new cancer treatments, including standard chemotherapy, targeted therapies, and immunotherapies, all made possible by decades of the National Cancer Institute investment into basic research. Another example relates to Alzheimer's and dementia research. Because of studies financed by the National Institute on Aging, researchers now have an array of biomarker tests for dementia, including a new blood test allowing for earlier diagnosis of this devastating disease. But the continued success of this system and America's leadership cannot be taken for granted. Since the turn of the century, China's investment in biomedical research has grown more than 50-fold. China has now caught up with the U.S. in biomedical patents filed and papers published. Proposed funding cuts, the firing of essential federal scientists, and policy uncertainties threaten to undermine the foundation for our nation's global leadership. One such recent development has been the unilateral imposition of an arbitrary 15% indirect cost cap on NIH grants in February, followed by more recent caps on grants from DOE and other federal agencies. While some reform of the facilities and administrative system may be merited, this one-size-fits-all cap will be extremely harmful to many institutions and the people who benefit from their work. They also are directly contrary to language approved by this committee year after year after year and incorporated into appropriations law. Also very troubling are the administration's abrupt cancellation of grants, proposals to slash federal funding, and laying off scientists and technical experts with apparently little or no justification. These actions put our leadership in biomedical innovation at real risk and must be reversed. America's edge in biomedical innovation is also of immense economic value to the nation, generating, for example, $2.50 for each dollar invested through NIH, supporting 400,000 jobs and driving global health standards. In Maine, NIH grants and contracts support 1,468 jobs and $286 million in economic activity. But we must not lose sight at what is truly at stake here. This debate is not just about scientists and researchers and economic activity. If clinical trials are halted, research is stopped, and laboratories are closed, effective treatments and cures for diseases like Alzheimer's, type 1 diabetes, childhood cancers, and Duchenne's muscular dystrophy will be delayed or not discovered at all. We must preserve and strengthen America's leadership for the sake of families all across this country. I'm now happy to turn to Vice Chair Murray for her opening statement.
Thank you very much. And let me start by congratulating you, Senator Collins, first hearing as chair. We've managed to do a lot of bipartisan work over the past few years, and I hope we can continue to build off of that record. And I really appreciate this important hearing on biomedical research. It is an issue with longstanding bipartisan support. We have worked together for many times over the years, along with our colleagues, to invest in advancing medical breakthroughs. And those investments have paid off in so many ways, not just billions in economic activity, hundreds of thousands of jobs, and a medical research enterprise that is the envy of the world. They've also paid off with genuine miracles, cures that were once impossible, treatments that were once unthinkable. These are investments that give patients hope for the future, that give them back a life derailed by a disease, that give people precious time, more time with their loved ones, which is why I am so deeply alarmed that President Trump has taken a wrecking ball to our biomedical research enterprise. He and Elon Musk have been tossing tomorrow's groundbreaking cures into a shredder. From day one, DOGE has been cutting critical research without rhyme or reason or any regard for who gets hurt. Trump has already axed 800 grants over $1 billion in research for HIV prevention, breast cancer, pregnancy, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and more. They've also blocked $2 billion in grant funding from going out to universities and research institutions across our country. And they slapped a $1 limit on NIH researchers' payment cards, meaning that our labs cannot get gloves or pipettes and vials. These are the basic things you need to do research. If Trump and Musk have their way, they are not just going to grind medical research to a halt, they will send it careening backwards. Because Trump apparently wants to slash $21 billion from NIH next year. That would be a 44% cut, the biggest cut in NIH history. He also wants to defy a bipartisan law this committee worked to pass so he can massively cut funding for basic costs that keeps our labs running. If Trump succeeds here, a lot of world-class research institutions like the Fred Hutch Cancer Center and the University of Washington in my state will face massive shortfalls. The fact that Trump and Musk are pushing such a painful policy really underscores how they don't know or don't care whether their policies actually hurt people. And if you needed any more evidence that there's no real strategy here, just consider the Women's Health Initiative. It was coordinated by the Fred Hutch Cancer Center in my home state of Washington. It has led to major advancements in our understanding of women's health issues, especially in older women. It has paved the way for a generation of researchers focused on women's health. That is something we never had before. And yet Trump was going to axe it, presumably because he thinks it's woke to care about women's health. Then hardly 24 hours later, he claims to have reversed course following a loud public outcry. Yet the Fred Hutch Cancer Research still has not heard from NIH directly on if that funding will actually be restored. Trump's 360 really goes to show you these cuts and firings are not about some big strategy, just chaos and extortion. We have seen Trump freeze billions of research dollars for purely political reasons, putting his own petty grievances ahead of curing cancer and saving lives. None of us should stand for that, not for a minute. And just as slashing NIH isn't about a strategy for our country, it's not about efficiency either. NIH has an incredibly high return on investment. While medical research accounts for less than 1% of the federal budget, NIH has contributed to over 99% of drugs approved by FDA in recent years. And while we're talking about government efficiency, let's not forget the FDA, which families trust to keep them safe, because the NIH breakthrough won't do much good if FDA does not have the staff and resources they need to approve new drugs. But Trump cannot gut FDA, push out 4,000 workers, and expect to maintain that gold standard that keeps food and drugs safe and gives our nation a competitive edge. And NIH cuts are not just cutting off promising future research, but undermining studies we are right in the middle of right now. One NIH lab that analyzes blood samples for more than 200 trials, studying cancer treatments, organ transplants, and more, lost half its staff during Trump and Elon's layoffs. Right now, in this country, patients in clinical trials are praying for a breakthrough. They're seeing their best hope cut off by the richest people in the world. And worse than undermining any one study, Trump and Musk are also cutting the beating heart out of our medical research enterprise by pushing talented researchers out the door. Trump has pushed out nearly 5,000 people at NIH and counting. China is already trying to seize the moment and recruit some of the brightest talent, and the same for Europe. Instead of supporting new talent, Trump is slashing grants for our early career scientists. I heard about this firsthand a few weeks ago. I was out in my state speaking with researchers and students at WSU in Vancouver. Bright young people who want to do their medical research here are suddenly worried. Why start that PhD if their funding is going to get yanked away? Why study new vaccines if RFK Jr. is going to meddle in their work? Why come to the U.S. for promising research if Trump might just try to deport them for jaywalking? Make no mistake, the United States is the world leader in medical research, but creating that was not an accident, and maintaining it is not inevitable. It is a choice we make through our investments, one that is paid off on a scale that cannot be measured. How do you measure the miracle of eliminating a disease, of funding a cure, of developing a new vaccine? How do you measure giving someone the chance to become a parent or to see their grandkids? You can't. Which leads me to the question I hope we focus on today. Why on earth would we let Trump slash that all to ribbons? Why on earth would we give up on Alzheimer's research or heart disease or cancer? I will tell you, I am not giving up on patients. I am not giving up on cures. I suspect many others here feel the same. So I hope this discussion today helps us focus on that common ground, and that working together, we can push back on these devastating cuts and push forward the research that is so important to folks back home. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Murray. Don't want to promote you back there. We will now turn to our distinguished witnesses. Our first witness today is Dr. Sudip Parikh. He is the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Publisher of Science, the premier weekly in the field, and he also serves as the CEO for the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Dr. Parikh began his career at NIH, but I want to point out that he also spent time as a professional staff member on this committee. So he has an unusual blend of knowledge that is particularly helpful to this committee. Next, I'm pleased to say that we will hear from Dr. Herman Haller, the president of MDI Biological Lab in Bar Harbor, Maine. Dr. Haller will describe the innovative research done at MDI Lab. He will also tell us about his personal journey from his native Germany, where he earned his medical degree, to studying science at Yale University, and what that teaches us about the attractiveness of America's model to scientists all around the globe. Our next witness will be Carter Esham, the Executive Director from the Alliance for a Stronger FDA. Prior to serving in her current role, Dr. Esham was the Chief Scientific Officer and Executive Vice President of the Biotechnology Innovation Organization. I will now turn to Senator Britt to introduce our witness from the state of Alabama.
Thank you, Chair Collins, and congratulations on your first hearing in this distinguished role. Thank you to Chair Collins, Ranking Member Murray, and fellow members of the committee for the opportunity to introduce our witness today. It is a distinct honor to introduce Dr. Barry Sleckman, a leading voice in cancer research and patient care, and a true asset to the whole state of Alabama and to our nation. Dr. Sleckman serves as director of the UAB O'Neill Comprehensive Cancer Center in Birmingham, Alabama. It is Alabama's only National Cancer Institute designated comprehensive cancer center. Thanks to his leadership, UAB's O'Neill Comprehensive Cancer Center has continued to fulfill its mission, bringing hope to families and communities with the ultimate vision of a life without cancer for patients across Alabama and the Southeast. We are blessed to have him and his expertise and his commitment in Alabama, and I am grateful he is here with us today to share his insights. It is my distinct honor to introduce Dr. Barry Sleckman before the Appropriations Committee hearing today.
Thank you, Senator Britt. I'll now turn to Vice Chair Murray for her introduction of our witness from the state of Washington.
Thank you, Chair Collins. I am always pleased to welcome voices from Washington State to share their personal stories. Today, we will hear from Emily Stenson. She's a mom, a patient advocate, and co-founder of the Stenson Foundation, which raises funds for promising pediatric cancer research. When Emily's daughter, Charlie, was 3 years old, they received some heartbreaking news, a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. But unfortunately, they were also able to receive world-class help. Charlie participated in clinical trials at Seattle Children's Hospital, which drastically improved her quality of life. And she has been cancer-free since December 2024. That's wonderful news. And I'm especially pleased to say Charlie is here today with us as well. Thank you for being here, Charlie, and bringing your mom. And congratulations. During this journey, Emily and her husband, Derek, saw firsthand how invaluable medical research can be to families, how hard it can be to get research funding for rare conditions like pediatric cancer. That's why she founded the Stenson Foundation to raise funds for pediatric research and to help patients like her daughter. Emily, thank you so much for coming and joining us and sharing your story and to speak about the power of innovative research in saving young lives and the crucial role of federal funding for these programs. We all look forward to your testimony.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to call on our first witness, Dr. Parikh. Please begin.
Thank you, Chair Collins, and thank you, Vice Chair Murray, and thank you to the members of the committee. Thanks for the invitation. I want to start by just taking stock for a second. We live in just an extraordinary world. It's a world where a child that's born with cystic fibrosis has every hope of becoming a grandparent. Now, that's a miracle, when just a few years ago, they might have died in their teens. We live in a world in which the most common type of childhood leukemia has gone from a death sentence to a 90% survival rate. We live in a world in which a mother with sickle cell anemia has not needed a blood transfusion in more than 5 years. 5 years without debilitating pain in which she can take care of her children. We also live in a world where the economic benefits of those advances have grown the U.S. GDP and have helped create jobs and additional investment. And, Senator Murray used the word miracles. And as scientists, we sometimes shy away from the word miracles. But I grew up in North Carolina. And sometimes I would hear people say that you could see the grace of God. There were times you could see the grace of God. I think that there are moments when you can see the hand of God working through the work of advocacy by patients and the pipette of a scientist to touch a patient. I think that's very true. And our U.S. ecosystem is why that's possible. It's why that's possible. It's a miracle made by our ecosystem. Our ecosystem includes a vibrant biotech and pharmaceutical industry. It includes effective philanthropy, innovative academicians, multiple government funding agencies, regulatory agencies, passionate patient advocates, and diverse sources of capital from all across this country and talent from everywhere. But it starts right here. Each and every one of you all, this committee has been champions on behalf of biomedical research for as long as I can remember. And that vision is what has propelled us to those miracles that have happened so far. And it's also why I'm an advocate for the entire system. I'm an advocate for fixing the R&D tax credit. I'm an advocate for not taxing SBIR grants as revenue. I'm an advocate for ensuring that our regulation is optimized. But it all starts with federal funding for biomedical research. That's the light and the heat for this ecosystem. And many of these achievements that we've talked about have really humble beginnings. In the early 1990s, scientists were studying DNA in bacteria, and they discovered that parts of that DNA repeated over and over again. And they thought that was curious, thought that was interesting. And by 2012, scientists realized that this biological oddity was actually a possibility for editing genes, editing genomes, and could cure disease. And today, after intense investment by the NIH and other agencies, by investments by industry and capital and venture capital, we have a cure for sickle cell anemia in the hands of patients. That's remarkable. That's absolutely remarkable, and it's not by accident. And if you'd asked those scientists in the 1990s why they were studying those bacteria, they would have said out of curiosity, or they might have said to make better yogurt, because that was probably the only thing that was close at hand. And the real answer is we don't know, but someday it could be something really important. Now, you've been following all this because you care about patients, you care about their families, you care about the biomedical research that gives them hope. I've watched you all lead. I've watched every one of you lead in a certain aspect of science and health. And I want you to know that the miracles and economic growth that I noted at the beginning of my statement would not have been possible without your leadership, so thank you for that. But despite our successes, and there are just many tragedies that remain, chronic diseases, cancer, drug addiction, suicide, other maladies take far too many lives. And one of the things that everybody agrees on is that we've got to make sure that our ecosystem works for all Americans. But there is some grave risk ahead, and I want to talk about two things. The possibility of impoundment or rescission of FY 2025 funds. And now here's where I'm going to geek out a little bit on appropriations, Chair Collins, since you noted that I used to work here. We are not obligating those funds that you all appropriated at a rate that will ensure that they actually get obligated by the end of 2025. Now what that means is we could end up with impoundment by default because we didn't spend the money. And it's not because there aren't ideas. You're going to hear from my colleagues here at the table about the wonderful ideas and proposals that are still out there for science. It's not because there aren't ideas, and it's not because there aren't paths forward for patients. It's because we've lost the machinery to make that peer review and to make that grant administration happen. And we can't let that be a passive way of cutting biomedical research. Second, there's the possibility of catastrophic cuts in 26. I've seen, and you all have seen, the leaked pass-back budget. Now, I hope it's not real. I hope it's wrong. But if those dollar numbers, anywhere from 20 to 45% are real, I want to be really clear. We're no longer in a race with China on biomedical research. We will have lost that race. I want to just be really clear about that. Those numbers do not enable us to compete. Now, investments in science aren't the only thing you need. You need people. You need people. And one of the things I'll note is it's not just NIH. The National Science Foundation has cut by over one half, the number of graduate research fellowships that they're going to provide to students. These are the best students in our country, the absolute best, the cream of the crop, and we've cut it by 55%. That sends a horrible message to the scientists that are working on behalf of patients. It is just the wrong message to send. And so I want to come here because I'm determined to find common ground about how we can protect and strengthen the scientific enterprise. Because make no mistake, if an effective treatment for Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's or cancer comes from Birmingham or Bellingham or Baton Rouge or Beijing or Brussels, we're all going to be thankful for it and we're going to use it. And we're going to applaud those who contributed to it. But as an American, I want the benefits from that cure, from that advance, to come here to the United States of America, because we are the ones that put us at the cusp of these discoveries and these cures. And so that's what I've come here to work with you all on. And I will tell you that we've got to be the protagonists of our own story. We can't let passive things happen, like the idea that we're not going to obligate funds that you all already appropriated, destroy something that we've built over 80 years. Because if we allow it to break, we can't just put it back together again next year. It took generations to build it, and it'll take generations to rebuild it. And frankly, that is not the way to go. I'm optimistic that we can find a way forward together, but we got to start doing it now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Haller.
Senator Collins, Senator Murray, and distinguished members of the Senate Appropriations Committee, thank you for the honor of appearing before you today. My name is Dr. Herman Haller. I'm president of the Mount Desert Island Biological Laboratory, an independent research institution in northeastern Maine. I'm a physician scientist. I'm a kidney doctor. I've directed major clinical research centers. I've founded biotech companies, and I trained hundreds of students. For nearly a century, this has been mentioned before, the United States has led the world in biomedical innovation, and American science has shaped the modern world. These innovations were no accident. They were driven by far-sighted federal investments in gifted thinkers, bold ideas, and the infrastructure that allows science to thrive. That commitment has made the U.S., and this has also been mentioned before, an irresistible magnet for researchers like me who seek out the best resources, colleagues, and students. I came to the US from Germany as a postdoctoral researcher in 1987. Attracted by America's commitment to high-quality science and the freedom to explore new ideas. Over the decades, no institution has shaped my scientific vision more than the Mount Desert Island Biological Laboratory. At MDI Biolab, we focus on fundamental biological questions: how cells repair themselves, can damaged tissue regenerate, and how we make slow aging. These questions don't yield quick, marketable answers, but they form the bedrock of tomorrow's life-saving therapies. And we are also working to make this journey from discovery to treatment faster and more efficient. We innovate by using unconventional models like zebrafish and salamanders to study chronic disease and regeneration and to test new therapeutic compounds. This high-risk, high-reward science offers unique insights into human biology that leads to breakthrough discoveries. Sustained and thoughtful federal support is a lifeline for our work. My message to you today is simple. Federal funding for biomedical research is not just a cost. It's a national investment. It drives innovation, it fuels the economy, and it protects Americans' health. Programs like the NIH's Institutional Development Award, the IDEA program, have transformed rural states like ours into small powerhouses of scientific progress, allowing us to recruit and retain more than 50 scientists statewide and train more than 3,000 undergraduate students. That's good for science, that's good for health, and that's good for the economy. Still, as was mentioned before, we must go further. Chronic diseases from kidney failure, which has been my life's work, to Alzheimer's disease, impact millions of Americans and costs hundreds of billions of dollars annually. With strategic investment in research, we can halt these diseases before they become chronic. We also need more public support for drug development and for drug repurposing, finding new uses for existing medications. This is also fast and cost-effective. To ensure America remains the global leader of biomedical innovation, I respectfully urge you to support a forward-thinking strategy that includes, first, support for high-risk, high-reward research, providing coordinated, sustained funding from early discovery to clinical applications, feeding the innovation pipeline. Second, investment in research capacity, workforce training, the next generation, mentorship, particularly for rural and underserved areas. Third, a renewed focus on treating and preventing chronic disease, targeting our biggest health burdens. And last, fourth, funding for novel initiatives such as drug repurposing, accelerating safe and effective treatments. These are proven economical actions grounded in the values of discovery, opportunity, and public service. The lives we save tomorrow depend on the decisions we make today. Thank you for your leadership and for your support of American science. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Esham.
Good morning, Chairwoman Collins and Vice Chair Murray, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. The Alliance for a Stronger FDA is a group of more than 150 stakeholders, including consumer, patient, and research advocates, health professional societies, companies, and trade associations, all united about the vital role the FDA plays in safeguarding health, fostering innovation, and maintaining the United States global leadership position. While today's focus is biomedical research, I would like to convey the importance of the role the FDA serves in ensuring the safety of our nation's food and cosmetic supply, including working to prevent foodborne illnesses. It also regulates medical interventions that improve the health of over 100 million companion animals and more than 10 billion food animals. The biomedical research ecosystem in the U.S. is propelled by support for foundational research, that advances our understanding of the underlying causes of diseases to help inform how we prevent, cure, and treat them, as well as an FDA that works to innovate the regulatory environment, has the expertise and capacity required to keep pace with scientific advancements, and is able to provide efficient reviews and approvals of medical innovations that are based on a gold standard of safety and efficacy. Support for these biomedical innovation pillars are drivers of private investment. An FDA that is not open to innovation or unable to optimally manage its current and future workloads will negatively impact continued investment in next-generation medical interventions. The U.S. biopharmaceutical industry supports over 4 million jobs. In 2024, the U.S. accounted for 35% of all global clinical trial starts. China, 30%, Europe, 21%. 63% of these launches were by emerging biopharma companies, and this is a particularly important statistic when you consider that these companies are mainly pre-revenue, and their ability to continue to raise funds for clinical development programs is heavily influenced on whether there is a regulatory agency, such as the FDA, with the expertise and capacity required to review novel medicines. There has been a 38% increase in active clinical trials at CDER since 2014. Cell and gene therapy trials have tripled in recent years, and CBER is managing approximately 2,500 clinical trials, a number that is expected to grow. Right now, there are 3,400 clinical trials focused on neurodegenerative, neuromuscular, and psychiatric disorders, including Alzheimer's, depression, and Parkinson's. These increases are good news. They indicate strong innovation and the potential to improve the lives of millions of patients and their families, but they require an FDA that's open to innovation and able to optimally manage its work. Most of the novel medicines approved in 2024 continue to be launched in the U.S. The EU is second and China third, but showing a 47% increase over the past decade. The strength of an FDA is an important influencing factor in determining where first launches occur. The outcomes matter. Last year, we saw the approval of the first new type of treatment for schizophrenia in decades, a disease that affects 3.7 million Americans. And we saw the first treatment for non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which affects over 10 million Americans, as well as a new cell therapy treatment for solid cancers and several new treatments for rare diseases. MedTech is responsible for 2 million jobs in the United States and is projected to reach $800 billion in revenue by 2030 due to increased demand for wearable tech and health data collection services. Approximately 82% of device companies are also small companies and also depend on a strong FDA to advance their innovations. The Center for Disease Devices and Radiological Health manages over 248,000 devices, including pacemakers, hearing aids, vascular stent systems, and lasers, and the number of innovative medical devices authorized has increased fivefold since 2009. The overall number of devices launched in the U.S. or in parallel with other countries has been increasing, from 55% in 2022 to 65% in 2024, and it is no coincidence that these trends align with positive steps taken to improve the regulatory environment. Over the past few years, FDA has authorized exciting new medtech, including the first over-the-counter continuous glucose monitor, an AI-enabled system for pediatric autism diagnosis, and a spine simulator that restores function of upper extremities for patients with spinal cord injuries. We're also seeing artificial intelligence and machine learning take off. The number of AI, ML-enabled applications have increased 12-fold, and only 1,000 AI, ML devices have been authorized. An FDA with this expertise is critical to having the potential of these technological advances realized by the American public. I cannot overstate how critical the role of the FDA is for safeguarding health and maintaining the United States global biomedical leadership position. The agency's highly skilled cadre of scientists, medical experts, and regulatory professionals allow medical breakthroughs to reach patients safely and efficiently. We look forward to working with you in the administration as we all share a common goal and understanding that a strong, well-functioning, appropriately resourced FDA that embraces innovation is essential to the well-being of millions of Americans and ensuring America's biomedical leadership. And we, the Alliance, are here to help.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sleckman.
Chair Collins, Vice Chair Murray, Senator Britt, and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to be here today to share how biomedical research conducted in the United States impacts the health of American citizens. Though I will focus all of my comments on cancer research and cancer care, I want to emphasize that the advances in virtually all other chronic and acute illnesses have been equally remarkable, and all because of federal investments in biomedical research. I'm Barry Sleckman. I'm the director of the O'Neill Comprehensive Cancer Center at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, UAB. I have spent the past 27 years as a faculty member conducting cancer research. My research, along with that of thousands of other scientists in this country, is supported by the federal government primarily through the National Institutes of Health, NIH, and for cancer, the National Cancer Institute, NCI. On behalf of these scientists and myself, I would like to thank you all for decades of unwavering bipartisan support for U.S. biomedical research. In 1990, when I was a medical resident, I took care of several patients with metastatic melanoma whose life expectancy was measured in months. I would not have dared to have dreamed that in my lifetime there would be a treatment for metastatic melanoma. Yet, here we are today with 43% of patients with metastatic melanoma living 10 years or more due to new treatments that we refer to as cancer immunotherapy. These treatments were pioneered by a federally funded American scientist who, for this work, was awarded the Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine in 2018. The impact of federal support does not stop at these important new scientific discoveries. The NIH and NCI also provide support for clinical trials designed to test the safety and efficacy of novel treatments based on new scientific discoveries. As the sophistication and innovation of our research increases, so does the success rates of these trials. Indeed, as a result, there are thousands of Americans who are alive today and cancer-free due to new treatments they received as part of a cancer clinical trial. The Cancer Centers program funded by the NCI now includes 73 cancer centers that span rural and urban areas in 37 states and the District of Columbia. These NCI-designated centers form a critical network that accelerates breakthrough cancer research and life-saving cancer clinical trials. At any given time, thousands of research studies are underway at these NCI-designated cancer centers, many of which are collaborations between the cancer centers and the community and industry. Rightfully so, the American taxpayers want to know whether they are getting a good health return on investment for the substantial federal funds that have been put into biomedical research in this country. Well, for cancer, consider this. The mortality from cancer has declined 34% in the last 30 years. In the U.S., in 2000, there were 8 million cancer survivors. In 2022, 18 million. And the number in 2040 is predicted to reach 26 million cancer survivors. A number of cancer survivors that is greater than the combined populations of the states of Washington, Maine, Alabama, Kentucky, and Connecticut. In 2000, the average survival of a patient with metastatic melanoma was 6.5 months. Today, it is 6 years. 6 years, and there are 39,000 people in this country living with metastatic melanoma. Senators, due to basic biomedical research fueled by federal investments, these individuals together will enjoy an additional 215,000 years, 215,000 years of life. Impactful biomedical research that lessens the burden of disease does not only take a village, it takes a country. Until recently, this country has been undeniably the United States. For generations, the U.S. has had an unwavering commitment to biomedical research, training the next generation of scientists, and accelerating the pace of disease-curing discoveries. I have barely scratched the surface of the impact of this commitment in my testimony today. I'd like to close with a photo that I keep on my desk as a reminder of the importance of what we do. Each year, the O'Neill Comprehensive Cancer Center at UAB honors 9 cancer patients at the O'Neill Iron Strong Award ceremony. 9 patients who had otherwise fatal cancers before entering a clinical trial at the O'Neill. 9 patients alive today thanks to new experimental treatments that they received on those trials. Take a good look at them. They're young and they're old. They're men and they're women. They're black and they're white. But they are all healthy, happy, and cancer-free, some for more than a decade. Patients like this is why we do what we do, and what we do would not be possible without federal government support through the NIH and NCI. I would like to thank you again for the opportunity to speak here today, and on behalf of these patients and the thousands of biomedical researchers in this country whose tireless efforts have given them life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Stetson.
Good morning, Chairwoman Collins, Ranking Member Murray, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Emily Stenson, and I am here today with my 5-year-old daughter, Charlie, to share our family story and to speak to the critical importance of pediatric medical research. I sit before you not only as a mother, but as a witness to what federally supported research can make possible and what it would mean to lose it. Charlie was diagnosed with stage 4 germ cell cancer in November of 2022 when she was just 3 years old. After more than a year of unexplained symptoms, doctors discovered a 5-inch tumor in her belly that had already spread to her liver. Our life changed overnight. We started treatment at a local hospital, but soon transferred to Seattle Children's for specialized care. There, Charlie received high-dose chemotherapy and stem cell transplants, some of the most advanced pediatric cancer care available. In March of 2024, we heard the words we had prayed so hard for, that Charlie was cancer-free. But just months later, scans showed a relapse. Her baby brother was only 2 months old when we learned the cancer had returned. Relapse treatment was the hardest stretch yet. Charlie lost weight, she needed a feeding tube, and she battled through brutal side effects. Through it all, Charlie never lost her smile. And today, I'm proud to say that Charlie is again cancer-free. She started preschool in February and is back to the joyful chaos of 5-year-old life. Clearly, she loves coloring, playing dress-up, and chasing her siblings. These moments aren't guaranteed for any child, but for us, they are made possible because Congress chooses to invest in research. As you can imagine, this road has not been easy. We faced a nationwide chemotherapy shortage, moved our family to Seattle for her safety, and at one point, we were told Charlie might require a full hysterectomy or live with an ostomy bag for the rest of her life. Possibilities that were devastating to sit with. Thankfully, neither became a reality. Charlie has fought through a very scary anaphylactic reaction to a medication, a failed extubation after liver surgery that left us terrified, and painful post-surgical complications. These all weren't just medical setbacks. They were moments of deep fear, made survivable only through expert care, resources, and Charlie's incredible bravery. Seattle Children's leadership in clinical trials gave Charlie access to treatments that preserved her hearing, provided fertility preservation methods, and gave her a fighting chance. She received expert care from a leading germ cell cancer specialist, all because of the infrastructure and innovation that only research can provide. Every option we had was built on the courage of families before us, families who participated in studies and fought for funding. Because of their efforts, we had hope, we had choices, and we had a path forward. But not every family gets that. I know parents who were sent home on diagnosis day, told simply to make memories. That is a devastating reality, and only one that federally funded research can change.
Real-time advances continue to matter. Charlie's tumor went undetected for so long because she's in the 10% of patients whose tumors don't show up on standard blood tests. But researchers are now developing a groundbreaking test using mRNA to detect relapse early through a simple blood draw. That could be life-saving for kids like mine, and it's possible because of continued research investment. And there is nothing that makes my family more deserving of hope than yours. We aren't any different. And if you were in my shoes, you would want to know that everything possible was being done to save your child or grandchild. Can we confidently say our nation is doing all that it can for our kids? We cannot afford to slow down, not now, not when so many lives hang in the balance. Cuts to medical research are not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They are stolen chances, unfinished stories, and futures left unrealized. Progress in pediatric research is not a luxury, it is a lifeline, and for families like mine, it is deeply personal. That's why I'm asking you today, please continue to fund and prioritize pediatric medical research. Every investment you make saves lives, protects futures, and gives children like Charlie a fighting chance to grow up and thrive. Thank you for the opportunity to share our story, and thank you for your commitment to saving the lives of our nation's children.
Mrs. Stenson, thank you so much for putting a human face on this story and the need for this research and for bringing Charlie with you. Thank you. We've talked a lot and will talk a lot about NIH. We often overlook the fact that there are other agencies, such as the National Science Foundation, that are deeply involved in supporting the basic research that lays the groundwork for critical developments to promote human health. So, Dr. Parikh, I'd like to start with you and to ask you to describe some of the contributions to biomedical research and innovation that have derived from NSF-supported basic research.
Thank you for that, and thank you for realizing that. The National Science Foundation is an extraordinary funding agency in that it funds basic research. It's one of the only parts of the federal government that funds just basic research. And some of the things that have come out of that are, I told you the story about CRISPR and gene editing. The basic research, whenever you start looking at bacteria, when you are only looking at, there are scientists who go out into, that find these bacteria that live in hot springs and that sort of thing. That's funded out of curiosity-driven research. But that curiosity-driven research eventually leads to cures, and it has multiple times. It's also led to the development of things like the technologies that we use for imaging. Basic research is coming from the National Science Foundation. The engineering is coming from the National Science Foundation. The National Science Foundation also creates the people. And I told you about the graduate research fellowships. That is a remarkable program because what it does is it doesn't say that money is going to go to some institution. It chooses the best students in America, absolute best. And it says, here's funding for you. Go where you think you can make a difference. That is worth so much, and it's driven discovery for decades. And we're cutting it.
Thank you. Dr. Haller, we've talked a lot about the very arbitrary 15% cap that usually is negotiated between NIH and the grant-receiving institution. But in this case, the administration has proposed an across-the-board cap of 15%. Could you tell us how this proposed cap on indirect costs, also known as facilities and administrative costs, would affect MDI Biological Laboratory?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much for the question. To understand this, what the cap means, we have to look at the funding system. Very briefly, you know all that you apply for a grant, and the grants are highly competitive, and they are given on the basis of scientific excellence. But before a scientist can start doing this research and using the grant money, they have to be provided with lab space, sophisticated laboratory space, with the services and the supplies needed to be able to carry out the research. The costs, the indirect costs, are real costs. They provide the basis for HR in our institution, for the federal regulation that we fulfill the requirements for that, for microscopes we use across the institution. This is all what we need the indirect costs for. Independent research institutions like mine, without a large endowment and without revenues from tuition, we are dependent on the present system of indirect cost reimbursement because we have no other means to cover them. So there is always room for improvement, and we are open for discussions, but the proposed 15% cap endangers our work and the work of all the other independent research institutions, and we will not be able to participate in what we have heard here in life-saving research and biomedical breakthroughs.
Thank you. Vice Chair Murray.
Thank you. Emily, thank you so much for being here to share your story and Charlie's story and your experience at Seattle Children's. I can't imagine what you've gone through to make sure Charlie got the right care and treatment. And I'm glad to know that thanks to the National Cancer Institute clinical trial, she is now cancer-free. But we know that life-saving cancer clinical trials are on the chopping block. In less than 100 days, the Trump administration has terminated 55 NIH cancer research grants. That's more than $137 million that has been ripped away from researchers in 18 states. And on top of that, the leaked budget from this administration shows they plan to cut NIH funding nearly in half. So, Emily, if half of the cancer clinical trials were suddenly canceled, what would that mean for patients like Charlie and the people you know on the cancer ward at Seattle Children's?
It would be devastating. There's no other option often than a clinical trial. And how can you look at these families and say, we're taking away the only option to save your child? There's no funding. It feels like the government doesn't care about families like ours if they take that away. It will be futures like left in the balance.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Dr. Parikh, for the last 3 months, NIH has awarded billions of dollars less in funding over the same period from previous years. For a 10-day stretch in February, NIH did not award a single grant. That is unprecedented for an agency that typically awards about 60,000 grants a year. And meanwhile, President Trump has fired or pushed out nearly 5,000 NIH employees, including grant administrators whose job it is to get that funding out the door. So I wanted to ask you, at this rate, do you think NIH will be able to spend the $47 billion Congress passed and President Trump signed into law?
Thank you for that. If the will is there, they can, because I know the program folks that are still there, and they will work harder than anybody to work with the scientists in the field to do the peer review, to get those dollars out, because those dollars are not about just getting money out the door. It's about funding the ideas that have been proposed. And there are plenty of proposals. There are plenty of good ideas. We don't fund enough. The pay lines are already at 20 and 10%. We need to make sure that we do get those dollars out, because otherwise it will be impoundment by default.
Well, we know that they have canceled peer review panels and they're firing staff. So can they get that funding out the door effectively?
Only if it becomes a priority. Only if it becomes a priority. We have to make sure that it can go out. I'm confident that it can if they make it a priority. I have not seen that yet. The they is the NIH administrators, the leaders, and the Department of Health and Human Services. We have to be able to say that we are going to start awarding these grants at the rate that it requires to get to the fully appropriated amount that you all approved at the end of last fiscal year.
To your knowledge, has that been done?
Not yet. The rate isn't quite there yet.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Sleckman, let me turn to you. After 34 years, the Trump administration announced it was going to stop the Women's Health Initiative. That's a long-term, first-of-kind project that was launched actually in 1991 to study cancer and heart disease and osteoporosis in postmenopausal women. And thanks to that research, 126,000 cases of breast cancer and 76,000 cases of heart disease were prevented over a decade. The Fred Hutch Cancer Center research in my state is the clinical coordinating center and one of the 4 regional centers that was told last week that its funding was being terminated. Supposedly it's back, but that is very unclear right now. The annual funding for these centers costs about $10 million. That's less than half, by the way, of what taxpayers spend on President Trump's golf trips, just in case you were keeping track over the last 3 months, but $10 million. How important, I wanted to ask you, is sex in the diagnosis of treatment of cancer? And do you think now is the time to be cutting breast cancer research?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Senator. Let me make a comment first about the women's health study. These types of studies are essential for cancer and understanding the basis of cancer. This is a very long-term study, not a 5-year grant, something where they've been following women for decades and using that information to understand about cancer risk and then make informed decisions about cancer prevention. These types of studies could only be funded in a large, organized way through the federal government, the NIH, and the NCI. I think getting back to your question is that it's extremely important to study the differences, biological difference between men and women when it comes to cancer risk, cancer progression, and cancer treatment. Extremely important. There are large groups at pretty much all NCI cancer centers that either take that into account when they're designing a trial or are studying it specifically. Absolutely important. Thank you for that question.
Thank you very much.
Senator Kennedy.
Dr. Parikh, am I saying that right?
You are.
Thank you. Do you know anybody who's against biomedical research?
I do not know anybody that's against biomedical research, but I know some.
That's like being against children, isn't it?
It is.
It's like being against world peace, isn't it?
It is.
It's like being against golden retrievers, isn't it?
There's some people that argue there.
Okay. Well, let's get that out of the way. I want to ask you about NIH. I love NIH. I think they do extraordinary work.
Yes, sir.
But isn't it a fact if NIH assigns way too much money for overhead, that money comes out of the basic research? Isn't that the case?
Senator, both those things are providing funds for research. And I agree with you that we need to make the administrative burden and the costs associated with it as low as possible, because we do want as much to go to research.
Well, why can't NIH live with 15% overhead?
Yeah. Senator, we have had a partnership that's been going on for 75 years in this country.
Yes, sir, but why can't NIH live with 15% overhead?
At this point, what that would do is actually turn institutions like the ones we've heard about here, it would actually make it to where they are laying off researchers and the support folks who are
Well, the Gates Foundation, when they make grants, they limit overhead to 10%, don't they?
They do, sir, but that is apples to oranges because they count different things.
And the Roberts Woods Johnson Foundation limits overhead to 12%, don't they?
They do. Again, apples to oranges because they count different things.
Isn't it a fact that the universities that receive the most money from NIH also have the biggest endowments?
I haven't checked that, but it probably is true, Senator. And I agree with you. There are challenges that we need to work on.
Well, let's take Harvard. 69 cents out of every dollar from NIH given to Harvard goes to overhead.
No, sir, it's 69 cents out of every $1.69. It's on top of, it's not within.
Okay. Let me ask you about one of the worst abuses I've ever seen. It was at Stanford.
Yes, sir.
Stanford was spending 74% of grants from NIH on overhead. Remember that?
I do, although I was in high school at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't. and they audited Stanford.
Yes, sir.
You remember what they found?
They bought a sailboat.
They found that Stanford was spending some of that money to pay the salaries of the employees at a Stanford-owned shopping center, didn't they?
I don't remember that part.
I do.
But yeah, okay.
They found that Stanford was spending some of that money that was supposed to go to research, ladies and gentlemen, to renovate the president's home,
Yes, sir.
didn't they?
I believe so, Senator. Again.
And to
when I was in high
renovate the vice provost's home, too, didn't they?
I believe you when you say that. Yes.
And they also charged, Stanford took NIH research money to help children and applied it to depreciation on a Stanford yacht, didn't they?
Yes, sir. Again, when I was in high school, sir.
Now, does NIH audit every year the way these grants are being spent?
They don't audit every year. There's a process for
So
determining.
they just trust the universities?
No, there's a negotiation that takes place between
Yes,
the
sir,
NIH
but if it's a
and the
five-year grant
Yes, sir.
and they agree on indirect costs, they don't audit it every year. What if the universities lie to them?
That is absolutely a possibility. There's a,
What does fungible mean?
fungible means that you can move money from one place to another.
And money's fungible, isn't it?
Money is fungible.
I'm ready to have a productive discussion. I've got to go to another committee. Maybe you'll have it today. I haven't heard it.
Yes, sir.
What I've heard is the implication is that anybody who is against asking hard questions about the overhead and spending is against biomedical research.
I wouldn't say that, sir. I think you are a champion.
And I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I don't either.
But every penny that we spend on overhead that's not being audited, and you know as much as I do, Doc, that some of it is being abused, is money that is taken away from research. And that's just a fact.
Senator,
And if you care about this child here, and I know you do, we all do, then any money spent illegitimately on overhead to pay the salary of a professor in the humanities department at a university is coming out of her research. And it's not wrong to ask questions.
it is not wrong to ask
No,
questions.
it's not.
Not at all. And Senator, I think it's actually important to ask those questions and optimize the system.
And I don't understand why these universities cannot live on 15% overhead when Gates Foundation limits them to 10% and the Johnson Foundation limits them to 12%. I don't understand it. All of a sudden, if they don't get 35% overhead, civilization is going to melt.
It is important.
My
to have
mama
that
didn't
conversation.
raise a fool, and if she did, it was one of my brothers. I'm not buying that.
Senator,
Thank you.
I think it's worth the
The
conversation.
time has expired.
I
I'm
went way over. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I appreciate your indulgence.
I'm going to call on Senator Reid, but I also want to announce that a vote has started on the Senate floor. Senator Capito who chairs the subcommittee with jurisdiction over this issue, will take over as the chair while I go vote, but we will be trying to keep the hearing going in the meantime. Thank you, Senator.
Should I start? Well, thank you, Chair Collins, and thank you, Ranking Member Murray, for convening this very important hearing, and also thank you for the witness for your extraordinarily effective and timely testimony. Let's agree from the beginning, everybody loves biomedical research, but there's some people that don't want to fund it adequately, and they're in the administration. And that's why we're here today, frankly. I want to particularly thank Emily for coming and testifying. It must be difficult to talk about that. Let me also point out the obvious. Charlie's the best behaved person in this room, including all of us. So, Charlie, thank you. Dr. Sleckman, the Trump administration is slashing funds for research. And now they've raised up this issue of indirect costs. Oh, they're not central. We can be dismissed with. But the terminology really doesn't capture what these costs are for. They help keep patients safe while they're in treatment. They help to provide the sanitary situation in a hospital, research. They also are used in many cases to subsidize young professionals who eventually will become the real researchers several years from now. So can you talk about how this will impact the University of Alabama, your facilities, if it's cut to 15%?
Yes, Senator, thank you. I can certainly comment on that. As was discussed earlier, these costs, which we call indirect costs, are used to support all of the infrastructure required to do the research. So to kind of put it simply, if I was making automobiles and I considered how much it costs for parts and labor on the assembly line, those would be direct costs to make the automobile. The costs for the accountants, the salespeople, the depreciation of equipment, buildings, the security guard, those would be the indirect costs for making the automobile. So biomedical research, like any industry, has direct costs that go directly into the work product, which is the science, and indirect costs into things that support that science. A concrete example of a reduction of indirect costs for us was brought up earlier. If indirect cost drops, we will no longer be able to support the level of staff needed to safely open and run clinical trials. So when we get money for a clinical trial, that money goes directly to paying the costs of administering the new drug and taking care of the patient. It does not cover any of the costs of the oversight groups like the Institutional Review Board, the legal group that are required to open those trials, monitor them, and make sure that they're being run safely.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Parikh, mention was made of the Gates Foundation grants, other foundation grants. Don't they essentially sort of utilize this indirect costs that we put up so that their contribution can be much less in terms of indirect costs?
They certainly pool together, but in addition, they allow certain costs that we would call indirect costs for the federal government. They allow those to be considered in the direct costs, which means it's an apples to oranges comparison.
I think that's important to note. Finally, Emily, thank you for being here again. I've had the great fortune of working with my colleague, Senator Capito, on the STAR Act, which is the first legislation that focused NIH on pediatric cancer research, and we're very proud. We've worked together, a very capable lady, and we've got it through. So we've got NIH focused now much intensely on pediatric cancer research. And one of the reasons we do that, because we know it affects the whole family. It's not somebody, an adult can go to work and keep, put up with it. It's the whole family. And indeed, one of the aspects of our research in the STAR Act is the fact that we have required them to do long-term studies of the effects of cancer on children, not just the child, but the family, brothers and sisters, because that has to be dealt with too. And again, your remarkable testimony is deeply appreciated. Charlie's great. Anything else you'd like to add?
I'd just like to thank you for putting forth that act. And Charlie's actually followed by 2 clinical trials to measure her survivorship and to help other kids who are yet to come.
That's great. Thank you, Madam Chair, and go Charlie.
Thank you for that. It was a pleasure to be on the STAR Act, and we'll keep at it. Senator Britt.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here. Thank you for your opening testimony. It was incredibly powerful, and I have to agree, Charlie, you are absolutely the best. I want to welcome everyone that's here as well. I know we have a number of Alabamians, one of which I had an opportunity to meet this morning, Gary Cornelius, to tell his story, to talk about his journey, and to say thank you to the O'Neill Comprehensive Cancer Research Center for saving his life. And the truth is everyone knows a story like Gary's. It's either ours personally, it's a loved one's, it's a family member, it's a neighbor, it's a coworker. And so we understand that smart investment and continued research is essential to make sure that we can save lives and change lives moving forward. And so we've heard a lot about the progress that we've made over the last several years and decades, and want to thank you for that. Dr. Sleckman, I'd love to know, what are some of the initiatives currently going on at UAB? What are some of the things that you're doing and investing in that will ultimately change lives in the future?
Yes, thank you, Senator Britt, for that question. And I'd like to answer it on behalf of the dedicated researchers and clinical care professionals that really do the work at the O'Neill Comprehensive Cancer Center. It's really hard for me to answer that question. You know, people always ask, what's the most exciting thing that's going on? And I say, everything. Everything is exciting. And, you know, I couldn't have said that in 1990, but I can say that today. You know, next week, next month, we'll find that we'll turn the corner in a major clinical trial that now has given us some insight or hope for a treatment for an otherwise untreatable cancer. Those are the things that are the most exciting to me. But, you know, then again, I'm a basic scientist. So at heart, what I love more than anything is someone that comes into my office and says, yeah, we just had an amazing new finding in lab that we think will shed important insight into a disease, a cancer, or potentially a new treatment for a cancer or treatment of a resistant cancer. So those are the kind of things that are going on at the O'Neill Comprehensive Cancer Center. And honestly, those are the kind of things that are going on at all of the 72 other NCI-designated cancer centers in this country, thanks to the support of that program. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, and you also mentioned in your opening testimony, you said back when you were, you know, a young physician just starting out researching that type of thing, there were types of cancers you couldn't have imagined would be something that someone could live the way that they do now. You said, was it metastatic melanoma?
Metastatic melanoma,
so you
yes.
said it was 6 months and now it's 6 years. And I think that the average there, I mean, even over 43% of people diagnosed are living over 10 years past that. So that progress is tremendous. But we also see across the country that incidents of cancer overall are on the rise. What would you say is attributable to that? And then also a subset of that, what do you think about the fact that we feel like the younger population, we've seen an increase in cancer there as well?
Okay, yes, thank you for those questions, Senator Britt. I think that, first of all, the incidence of cancer is definitely rising in this country, and I would say that it will probably continue to rise. A lot of people have used that to discuss whether or not we're investing enough in prevention and doing a good enough job with prevention. And I would say we're probably not investing enough and we're not doing a good enough job. There's still plenty of people in this country who smoke. There's an obesity epidemic in several states, including our own. Those are risk factors for cancer. But the major risk factor, the major number one risk factor for cancer is age. And so the major reason that the cancer rate is increasing, are you ready? Is because we're having such great success with research in approaching other diseases, cardiovascular diseases, pulmonary diseases, renal diseases, neurologic diseases, infectious diseases, all things that would have killed citizens in this country before they got cancer, they're now living with to much older age where they increase the risk of getting cancer. And then you asked me about this new thing which has cropped up over the last couple of years where younger groups of people, some in their 20s, for example, are developing colon cancer. This is a serious problem. It hasn't reached epidemic levels yet, but it is disturbing that this has come up. There are new grant RFAs to actually begin to study this. I think that at this point, no one really has a good idea why that is, but we all know that we need to figure that out quickly.
And one more question, my time is expiring. Can you tell the committee why federal funding is unique in cancer prevention research?
Federal funding is unique in cancer prevention research in part because there are not a lot of other revenue streams for cancer prevention. This is not really a high priority, for example, for industry and pharma. And so federal funding to understand how to develop cancer prevention approaches is critical.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, and I want to thank our chair and vice chair for this hearing and the opportunity to discuss the importance of biomedical research and what the Trump administration's actions will mean for scientists, for research institutions, and most importantly, for patients. The Trump administration has eliminated 222 active training grants, stripping away more than $180 million from research institutions in 37 states. These programs train undergraduate researchers, master's students, graduate students, postdoctoral scholars, and early career scientists as they transition to faculty positions. In total, the administration has canceled $5 million in grants for the Medical College of Wisconsin, and I would like to request that a statement by the Medical College of Wisconsin be submitted for the record.
Without objection.
The administration has also canceled more than $10 million in grants to the University of Wisconsin. This means fewer jobs for Wisconsinites, fewer young scientists launching their careers at a time when the average age for receiving their first research project grant is already in the mid-40s. It means delaying research into life-saving cures and treatments. So I'd like to ask Dr. Parikh and Dr. Sleckman, what are the long-term implications of these actions on the next generation of scientists, on research institutions, and on America's leadership in biomedical innovation?
Senator Baldwin, thank you for that question. This is the thing that worries me the most. As I travel across the country, and in the last few weeks, I've been across the country talking to institutions, and the concern, the angst amongst our early career scientists, and that's even pre-graduate school, that's undergraduates, is enormous. And it is the biggest worry I have because they are considering things I've never heard before. Some are saying, perhaps I should just choose something outside the sciences. And then those who have their goals set on curing cancer or curing Alzheimer's, they've started looking elsewhere. Not just foreign nationals, Americans born in this country. And there are examples of this, of them being recruited all from around the world. There's a recruitment from a university in France. I can't say the name because I can't speak French, but there are real numbers there. 400 people applied. 136 of them or so are American citizens. We are going to lose talent in a way that we've never seen before. And industry needs that talent as well. This is not just about academics. This is about our industry, our GDP, and jobs.
Yeah. Dr. Sleckman?
Yes, thank you, Senator. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that even before this, there has been kind of this trail off of young trainees being interested in science. But what we've seen over the last several months has just accelerated that. And it's accelerated in a way that's kind of created this perfect storm where multiple factors have come together to lead to significant losses. Many universities and medical schools in this country have elected to, for example, cut the number of graduate students that they are having their first class by 50%, some even 75%. So those are people who will not enter graduate school this year and therefore will not enter the scientific workforce in 10 years. I'd also like to give an example which I find particularly disheartening and I think really embolizes or emphasizes the situation that we're in right now. I have a very good colleague, a friend of mine, who is a researcher at the NCI. He works in my field. He is nothing short of brilliant. He is a member of the National Academy of Science. He is a member of the National Academy of Medicine. He has been doing research at the NCI on DNA damage response and genome stability for 30 years. He is now looking at positions in Europe and Canada. Is this what we want? Is this what we want for the next generation of researchers and for our current generation?
Thank you. Mrs. Stenson, thank you so much for sharing your family story with us today. We saw reports just last week that Alzheimer's disease patients may lose access to clinical trials due to the Trump administration's decision to halt $65 million in funding to Alzheimer's disease research centers. About a dozen of those centers are actually running out of their funding today. The Trump administration is also withholding $47 million from 9 cancer centers across the country, and this funding was approved months ago. This isn't wasteful government spending. The Trump administration is putting real people's lives at risk. Meanwhile, they have fired more than 5,000 staff at the National Institutes for Health, which is delaying promising research on cancer immunotherapy treatments like Charlie received. Mrs. Stenson, what would delays for promising cancer treatments mean for families like yours?
It would mean we don't have other options to help our kids. And I know plenty of families who are waiting for new trials to come out. They're just sitting and waiting, and that is so miserable and devastating that they're waiting for more. And if the existing ones are getting cut, what are we going to do instead?
Thank you. Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for being here today. It's tremendously important, and it's very insightful. And I certainly have faith that we're going to get in a better position soon. The University of Mississippi's medical center is in my office right now. I just met with them and had to run out to come back so I could get these questions in, but they're our only academic medical center, and they're currently working toward achieving the National Cancer Institute designation, working on that really hard. But to date, there's been no NCI-designated centers in Mississippi, Louisiana, or Arkansas. So this situation requires Mississippians to travel distances for advanced cancer care. Earning NCI status requires significant research, and we know that's important, and there's a reason for that, in critical areas such as cancer biology, immunology, and genetics. So I'm going to ask Dr. Sleckman, as a researcher at an NCI-designated center, how could cancer research funding cuts affect institutions like UMMC in their efforts to achieve this status, and how can we improve this?
Thank you for that question, Senator. And as your neighbor, I understand the cancer burdens that your state experiences very, very well. I suspect that as they start to make cuts like this, they will look at programs, these larger programs, to absorb some of those cuts. And so, although I don't have a crystal ball, I would imagine that the rate of new cancer center designations, which over the last 5 years has been about 1 or so per year, will lessen. And there are many cancer centers, including the one in your own state, that are kind of in a holding pattern, waiting for the control tower to let them know that it's time to land. And those will have to stay holding for a longer period of time.
And also at UMMC, we do the longstanding research studies. The Jackson Heart Study, you're familiar with that, which studies the cardiovascular health and other things that address risk factors for preventions of dementia, which has been discussed earlier. Both of these studies have been funded by NIH for over 25 years, and understanding these complex conditions and how to address this best, it's not a fast process and requires years of study and investment. And Dr. Parikh, can you speak to that, please?
can. I had the real privilege of visiting Jackson when the study was starting, and I've seen it grow, and I've seen it actually produce results. To follow those populations for 25 years and to follow them for the next 25 years is how we're going to ensure that the access and the treatments and the cures that are available in Jackson are also available in the Delta. And that's the only way that's going to happen. And so if the Jackson Heart Study and others feel at risk, which surprisingly they do, I'm always surprised by that, but they feel at risk right now, as do many other studies across the country. We've got to be able to put forth a vision that says, this is actually what we're going to do. This is a priority. And thank you for showing it as a priority for the committee.
Well, thank you for what you've done in Mississippi. And Dr. Haller, in your testimony, you highlighted the NIH Institutional Development Award, or the IDEA program, and recommended NIH expand the program. The IDEA program has had a profound impact in my home state of Mississippi, and it has helped correct the historic imbalance in federal research funding, which has been concentrated at a small number of legacy institutions. IDEA has helped unlock innovations at schools across my state where the cutting-edge research is being conducted, and I'm currently working on protecting and continuing this program with my IDEA Reauthorization Act. But how has IDEA research funding fostered innovation that might have otherwise gone untapped?
Thank you very much, Senator, for this question. As I mentioned in my testimonial, the program has changed Maine considerably. We were one of the first states where the IDEA program was started in 2003. And over the years, I've mentioned this, we have trained 3,000 students. We have retained and first hired faculty. Now, we have to do more. We are training, but now we are training the workforce. We have talked a lot about clinical studies, so the next step is now also translational research. I think what's very important is an initiative we are thinking about and we want to start about clinical study centers throughout the state. At the moment, we have only few clinical centers, but there is an untapped possibility of Mainers participating in these studies, which helps the overall health, public health, which helps making diagnosis. So the IDEA program should grow. In the IDEA program, besides what we are already doing, educating the younger generation and hopefully not losing a whole generation of talented young people, we should work on translational research, and we should associate our efforts with what's happening in the biomedical and biotech industry in the state.
Great. Thank you for your answer. I'm out of time. Again, thank you all for participating.
Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if I could ask at the beginning that 6 statements from well-respected organizations expressing their support for NIH be submitted for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Senator. And I want to thank Chair Collins and Senator Murray and especially all of you, the witnesses, for your powerful testimony today. I've been listening on C-SPAN, and I just want to thank all of you for being witnesses as to why the work done at NIH and FDA and other places is so important to kids like Charlie and to our country. And I am proud that my state of Maryland is the home to NIH and FDA, but I'm especially proud of the work they do on behalf of Americans and American families every day. And what we have witnessed in this first 100 days of the Trump administration is a direct attack on NIH and medical research. And what that means, and you've all boiled it down, is that puts more Americans in harm's way. It means less research into life-saving treatments, life-saving cures and treatments. And of course, at the global level, it simply opens the door to our adversaries like China, who has been working very hard to sort of emulate the American model, So whether it's a threat to U.S. innovation in the area of medical innovation, or whether it's the direct harm done to American families, what we've been witnessing is a danger to all of us. Ms. Stenson, I'm glad to hear that your daughter, Charlie, very cute, is cancer-free, and that she's back enjoying the simple joys of being a kid. Earlier today, you did talk about how these moments are not guaranteed for many families impacted by pediatric cancer diagnoses, but they are made possible by life-saving research Congress and this committee has invested in the past. So as someone whose family has been so personally impacted, as well as your support for others who are battling pediatric cancer, can you talk about what progress in medical research and access to clinical trials has meant to you and other families?
Thank you for the question and for your kind words about Charlie. Access to clinical trials is huge in our community. Many families move state lines just to receive treatment and to save their children. And rolling back access it would be devastating, and we simply can't do it. We need to be expanding access and increasing cures for our children. There's far too many families who do not realize a cure, and it's never lost on me that we got to because of NIH funding and clinical trials, but there's so much more needed.
Thank you for, again, bearing personal witness to the great benefits of medical research and also the dangers of cutting in this area. Dr. Sleckman, I was heartening to see the photo you held up as a reminder of the importance of this work. And, like others on the committee, I'm very worried about how we are going to completely disincentivize younger researchers from engaging in this life-saving activity, and the impact, of course, that we're talking about on clinical trials. So can you also speak broadly to the dangers that we will all face if we continue to cut back in these areas and discourage young researchers from entering this important field?
Yes, thank you for that question. I think, we've touched on some of that today, but to crystallize that, clinical trials and running clinical trials is challenging for the researchers that do it. There's an awful lot of regulatory and administrative activities that go into that. And I would say that they do it primarily driven by their love and their passion for being able to provide their patients who otherwise may have untreatable cancers with a possible cure. And again, 30 years ago, when we put patients on cancer trials, there really was no kind of upfront feeling that the patient themselves would benefit from that. They were doing it to help us learn about treatments of the future. But as I said in my presentation, there are thousands and thousands of patients, of people walking around today alive because they had a good outcome from a treatment that they got on a trial. And so the medical professionals at my cancer center and the others are committed to doing that. But there's a certain limit to that commitment. If the challenges are made insurmountable, they won't be able to do it. If money is removed that supports the services that help them open the trial, now make it much more difficult for them to open the trial, eventually they'll say, well, I have to take care of patients in clinic. I don't have time to do this. So it's critical that we keep things in place the way they are now.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Senator Moran.
Chairman Collins, thank you very much, and thank you to our witnesses for your presentation. Thank you for your presence here. A couple of questions that I was going to ask have been asked and answered, but I do want to take the time that I have to make certain that from my perspective, on behalf of many, most Kansans, that we express our gratitude to those who are working every day to find the cure for the diseases that my constituents at home in Kansas and people around the country, and in fact around the world, they and their families are facing. You know, I was thinking as you all were speaking, there's not one American, not one, who doesn't benefit by the research that takes place in the search for that cure or treatment for disease and affliction. I can't think of other expenditures that, you know, maybe our national defense, every American benefits by protecting our country from our adversaries. But many of the things that we appropriate money for are narrowed toward a specific cause or a specific organization, a task that government has been given. This task of finding the cure for diseases is, there is no one who loses. There's no one that anybody has not benefited, even if they or their families, their people they know, haven't experienced the diseases that we're trying to find the cure for. I've always said that medical research provides hope. And I think about you, Ms. Stenson, and you indicated that not every family would have the capability of having the right kind of research to meet the needs of your circumstances. But I think all of us have hope if we learned something about a family member ourselves. What we can gain from medical research is the hope that either today or tomorrow or the next day, there's going to be that discovery that makes a difference in a person's life. And I just want to speak in support of this kind of research. We can prioritize, and we can certainly look for ways to be more efficient. We can find ways perhaps to eliminate things that make no sense at all. But those kind of things should not be the reason to criticize medical research in general or medical research totally. Criticize the mistakes that we make and make certain that it doesn't spill over into destroying an asset that this country has that is so valuable to us. Very few things in life provide, and I happen to believe there's a thing that provides hope in this world, but very few things that we do in Congress provide the hope that NIH provides for people across our country. So let's do our jobs. Let's make certain that we make the right kind of choices and make decisions that prioritize and eliminate things that need to be eliminated, but don't fall into the trap of saying that what happens at NIH doesn't matter. And it matters as we've been talking, and as I've been talking, at least about individuals and families and people. I want to make certain that there is no child, no person that we didn't support NIH for that loses out on a trial or a treatment or something that was discovered. On the other hand, I also want to make sure that we don't miss some young person whose dream in life it is to be a researcher, to find a cure for a disease. So we have to do our jobs well and do them right. This is, again, it's not the so-called throwing money at something to solve a problem, but it's making certain that no researcher misses out on the opportunity of pursuing their dream of research and solutions to life's problems. And no patient or potential patient loses the chance to live another day or another year or live a lifetime. We all want to have the benefit of long life and time with family and enjoyable things. And I look forward to working with my colleagues on this committee to make certain that we don't destroy the dream of a family or destroy the dream of a young person who's going to solve a problem. We focused a lot of our attention on certainly cancer, but Alzheimer's and Down syndrome. And I just think the potential is so great that we have a lot to be optimistic about. And we ought to take the chance whenever things come our way that actually work. Congress ought to take advantage of being supportive of them. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chair Collins and Vice Chair Murray. Thank you for convening this hearing. And I want to thank each of the researchers who has dedicated your lives to science, to medicine, to progress. Thank you for your testimony today. Emily, thank you. I am enraged and struggling with this hearing. Listening to you talk about the value of hope to you and your daughter with cancer, and the very measured and reasonable way in which we've all discussed what's happened makes me crazy. Because DOGE, in my view, is a horde of locusts who've been unleashed on the federal government, and they have torn up things that we have built over decades. Let me just briefly review. At NIH, 1,200 probationary researchers were laid off and another 1,300 fired. That's 2,500 dedicated researchers. At FDA, 3,500 staff. At NIH, DOGE canceled 800 grants valued at over $1 billion. And we were told these grants focused on DEI, when in fact they focused on diabetes, Alzheimer's, mRNA, and cancer. My father died of cancer. My father-in-law died of cancer. My stepfather died of cancer. Your daughter, Charlie, is with us today because of the incredible dedicated research and the groundbreaking work of people we've talked so calmly about today. Dr. Sleckman, I have a personal friend, a combat veteran, a Marine Corps colonel, who came to me when he was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic melanoma, as you just described, and whose life was saved by the research you described. I have a personal friend of decades, Nikki Soteropoulos, who came to me when he was diagnosed with brain cancer. His son, close friends with my sons, his wife, close with my wife. And he went to NIH month after month, year after year. Yes, clinical trials, doctor, sometimes doesn't benefit the individual, but I gotta tell you, it sure as hell benefited Nick and his family. It gave him hope and it kept him alive. And I don't understand how a single member of this Congress can look you in the eyes as a mother and say we should cut these programs. Sure, we can talk about overhead rates. Sure, we can talk about measured and thoughtful and reasonable ways to trim a little here or cut a little there, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is the whole-scale abandonment of billions of dollars of research. I was just at the University of Delaware last week at the National Institute for Innovation in Manufacturing Biopharmaceuticals. And you know what I was told? That at the University of Delaware, the little University of Delaware, Newark, Delaware, $55 million in health research, $55 million, has been delayed, paused, or withheld research on HIV, Alzheimer's, and characterization of cancer cells. And if that's happening in my little state all across our country, we are devastating the next generation of researchers. We are harming our nation and giving China the opening of a lifetime to recruit the best and brightest from around the world. And Emily, we are taking away from families like yours all over our nation hope. Emily, can you tell me how important hope is for you and Charlie? How important is it that we keep investing in research?
Thank you for the question. Hope gets you through the hardest days. And I know I explained in our story some of the hard days that we had, and hope is what kept my husband and I going and trying to save our daughter. There's no value you can put on hope, and we need to be providing it to all of the families like ours.
So yesterday I caught up with a Delawarean who's been living with ALS for years, and last weekend a close friend of mine confided his recent diagnosis with ALS. Senator Murkowski and I worked to get signed into law a bill to invest in ALS research. Dr. Esham, if I could, how will the cuts to FDA impact your agency's ability to characterize and bring new treatments to provide hope to those living with this horrific disease?
Thank you for that question, Senator. And I believe you're probably aware that the Alliance did send letters to this committee expressing our concerns about the volume of risks and departures and its potential impact on the ability of the FDA to be effective and be able to continue to evaluate safety and efficacy of next-generation medical interventions. I will say I did have the privilege of meeting with the commissioner on Monday and was happy to hear that that he does not have any major plans for a major reorganization. And while they're looking at efficiencies, potential consolidations and things like travel and IT and potential efficiencies that could be brought about by regulatory innovation, I was happy to hear that they are looking very hard and examining what functions need to be brought back to the agency to ensure that they are able to manage, optimally manage their workload and continue to review and approve next generation medicines. I think continued transparency and communications about this and engagement is going to be very important moving forward. The Alliance will be certainly examining the proposed budget, updates about staffing, including information about what positions are funded by user fees and how we can work together to make sure that in total, the FDA has the resources it has to have to not just approve what's before them now, but to continue to drive investment in the United States into next generation medicines. If we don't have a functioning FDA, that has a severe impact on the ability to raise funds for next generation medicines.
The FDA, the NIH, the National Cancer Institutes, all in combination, give hope to those facing the beast of cancer, the challenges of a new diagnosis, and the need for a path forward that's positive. Thank you for what you do. Thank you, Madam Chair, for this hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for this very important hearing. I wish that I had been able to spend the full morning here. We've all been pulled in so many different corners, but just the few minutes that I've been here with colleagues and listening to the comments and the concerns, know that I feel like everybody's speaking to me and my family situation. I just told Senator Moran that when he mentioned the hopes and dreams of young researchers being dashed, he's talking about my nephew. I called him yesterday because it was his birthday. He's a junior at Marquette. And he says, I'm floored by what we're seeing. All I want to do is find the cure. And Senator Coons, he wants to help find a cure for ALS because of how that has touched our family. And when we talk about hope and what happens when you don't have hope, I can tell you, because the ALS community reaches out to me as one of their advocates here, as I know they do with you, Senator Coons, and they said when they see the news about what is happening, the lack of hope pushes them to the point where unfortunately many are thinking about further shortening their time. Because without hope, how do you get through each day knowing that you are incrementally on the decline? And so the significance of what we're talking about and the contributions that we see through NIH, through our federal entities, those who are getting up every single morning to focus on hard things to make that incremental difference. And then those who back them. I see some in the audience here today who are giving their time and their treasure for advocacy in Alzheimer's, in ALS. I guess I want to ask a specific question here. We're dealing with unprecedented hits to the NIH and to those who have given their all to be there for others. We do a good job, I think, of taking the opportunities in other research areas to better gain leverage with the advancements that we make. How can we do more, particularly at this really difficult time, to ensure that the coordination that we have between complementary research efforts, and I see this with ALS, where NIH is focusing on understanding the biology, DOD is looking at the early stage drug development, the FDA is doing clinical trials, so you've got a lot going that comes together. What more can and should we be doing? And with the funding constraints that we are looking at right now, how are these collaboration efforts being compromised? And I'll throw this out to either you, Dr. Parikh, or Dr. Haller.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just very quickly, that coordination is vital when you're trying to approach something like ALS, which has so many different facets. But I'll tell you right now that at this moment, I want to just put a real face on this. We keep stiff upper lips here, but the scientific community is in paralysis right now. It is in paralysis across the country, in every state. There are graduate students, there are scientists, there are senior scientists who, instead of thinking about the very problems you're talking about, are thinking about the next grant, they're thinking about the next 6 weeks. And so if I can put a little bit of urgency for this committee, it is not about the FY26 appropriations process, which is going to be really important, and you're going to see a skinny budget that will scare the heck out of all of us. It's about the obligation of funding right now and making sure that we actually see some stability. That word stability, Madam Chair, that you used, is so important, and we have lost that right now. And there's paralysis that doesn't enable us to spend the time on thinking about the very good question you just asked.
Dr. Haller?
Thank you very much, Senator, for this very important question. Research is about stability and continuity, and I'll give you an example. We have recruited a wonderful, brilliant young researcher, Emily Stenson. She has been awarded for her PhD research on neuronal mechanisms. She's working on ALS. She's working in roundworms and understands how transporting molecules across neurons is important. Now, as a young researcher, she's driven by curiosity. She's driven by a desire to understand knowledge, to make contributions to understanding ALS and the disease. But at certain points of her career, she needs federal support. She needs this continuity. When you start as a young student, you need federal funding. When you embark on postdoctoral research, or in her case now waiting for the last 7 months that her grant she has written, which is excellent and will be reviewed, and it hasn't been reviewed. So this stability, this is what we need now at the moment. And then later on, when she becomes an accomplished scientist and is pursuing bold ideas, then federal support is needed again. And as was already mentioned, young people, we train them when they discuss what to do with their lives and whether they want to pursue a career in biomedical science. This message of uncertainty is deleterious.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for convening this hearing today. It is a tragedy that we have to hold it. And evidence of the catastrophic incompetence of the Trump administration that the U.S. Senate is reduced to holding hearings to affirm that, yes, clinical research into childhood cancer is worth investment. A young woman came into my office, Ms. Stenson, just a few weeks ago, and explained to me that she had stage 4 colorectal cancer, 3 children, and the clinical trial in which she'd been enrolled was paused. So those 3 little kids may now lose their mother. For what? Why? What's the constituency for this? Who out there in the American public is sitting at home demanding that we shut down cancer research and Alzheimer's research? We're going to pay for this not just in lives and children's lives right now, but we're going to pay for this for a century. Irreversible damage has already been done, and it's an outrage. And I hope that this hearing demonstrates that there's bipartisan rejection of these policies here in the United States Senate, and I hope that we'll follow up this hearing with real action. And Ms. Stenson, I've got a 3.5-year-old little girl at home, and thank God that your little girl is alive. every parent can understand when you hold your precious, innocent, kind child and you fear the most intense fear that something could happen to them, to think that American parents with children who have cancer now don't know whether they can enroll that child in a trial because maybe there's a way to save that life. It's devastating. So thank you for being here and bringing your sweet little girl. Thank you for sharing your testimony with us. I have here a statement for the record from Emory University in Georgia that includes the following statements. Quote, "This research has contributed to significant advancements in treating diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's, infectious diseases, and cardiovascular conditions. Federal support for biomedical research is essential. Cuts or stagnation in research funding jeopardize these efforts and could have far-reaching consequences for both patients and communities. Even a short interruption of research funding could set back scientific progress for decades. We urge Congress to continue prioritizing bipartisan investment in biomedical research." And Madam Chair, I'd like to ask consent to enter that into the record.
Without objection.
Mrs. Stenson, my understanding is that Charlie's participation in clinical trials saved your daughter's life. Is that right?
Yes.
And because of what you've experienced and what you've been through in your advocacy, I would imagine that you've come into contact with other families similarly situated whose children are only alive thanks to clinical trials.
Yes.
I'd like to ask, at the end of the day, sir, forgive me, the multi-decade potential impact of this war on medical research. Talk about the long run, please, sir.
I can tell you that in the next few months, we're going to determine, we're sitting at a crossroads. We are at this moment of extreme opportunity, and you've heard it from all of the scientists at this table about what's already been accomplished and what could be accomplished. Or there's another path, and that path is this path of the leaked pass-back budget. That budget, I hope it's wrong, but it says a 44% cut to NIH funding. And we can talk about administrative costs, we can talk about everything else. That level of funding means that we aren't in a race anymore. It means we aren't in a race anymore. And what that means is there may be cures for disease. There may be investment made in China and elsewhere that leads to some things happening that we would want. We're not going to be able to set the standards. We're not going to understand access. We're not going to have the ability to even catch up because the benefits will accrue to some other place. But what it really means for patients is that we can't drive the priorities. We can't say pediatric cancer. We can't say Alzheimer's. We can't say Parkinson's. We will have lost that race. And these early career scientists that are really in moments of panic right now, they are going to be determinative of whether or not we have a generation of scientists to replace the ones that we have today. This is not just a 5-year problem. It's a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year problem that it becomes not a virtuous cycle, but the opposite. It becomes a cycle on the way to a downward slope that we can't pull out of. In Germany, 100 years ago, if you wanted to do chemistry, you spoke German. And in the US, you spoke German. You had to learn German. 20 years from now, what is going to be the language of science? Is it going to be English? I don't know that for certain at this moment. We're at a crossroads to figure that out. It's a historical moment.
Well put, and it's urgent. Thank you all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Durbin. I'm sorry, Senator Shaheen, you were first. I apologize.
That's okay. Thank you, Senator Durbin, and thank you, Chair Collins and Vice Chair Murray, for holding this hearing. And thank you to all of our witnesses for your very eloquent and powerful and compelling testimony this morning. You know, I'm sorry that Senator Kennedy left the hearing because I thought he was effective in pointing out that all of us support biomedical research, that we all think it's important. But what I think he missed was we all also oppose waste, fraud, and abuse in these programs. We all also think that the example that he used from Stanford is one that we all believe should be cracked down on, and that should not happen in these programs. And so let's not be distracted by that, because that's a red herring. The fact is that I wish we were as concerned about auditing the Department of Defense as we are about auditing these research grants. We'd probably be saving more money. And the reality is that what we're talking about in terms of this research doesn't save money, it costs money in the long run, as all of you have pointed out so well. Now, Dr. Parikh, I thought you have made a very compelling case about our ability to compete with China. And while we've focused on NIH and the FDA today in this hearing, other agencies, USAID, the CDC, our foreign assistance programs, have also helped form the foundation for global disease surveillance, for our public health preparedness, and for being able to address the kinds of diseases and cures that we want to talk about. So I wonder if you could speak to how the cuts to U.S. foreign assistance, particularly in the global disease surveillance arena, undermine not just our ability to develop biomedical innovations, but also our national security, given the risk of drug-resistant diseases and undetected outbreaks that have in the past evolved into global threats.
Thank
Please,
you, Senator.
Dr. Parikh.
Thank you, Senator. Infectious disease doesn't know international boundaries, and something that's happening half a world away can be here in 12 hours. And so we have to have the ability to understand what is circulating around the world, and that is it's a technological thing, it's a sociological thing, it is a relationship-based thing. You have to actually build relationships around the world, and so you end up with this ability, where there are laboratories in South Africa that can help you identify something so that before it gets here, we have some idea of how to prepare. That is an extraordinary thing. It's not theoretical. It's happened in the past, and it will happen again. What it also has this element of soft power, of relationship building. There is nothing wrong with the idea that we're going to protect human beings from disease. In fact, it is the one thing that I think we all share in common. And so when we as a country project that ability, when we increase that capacity around the world, we make a difference today in terms of those relationships, and tomorrow in terms of ensuring that we don't have epidemics that become real problematic in this country.
Thank you. I agree. And sadly, what we've seen is a pullback in our foreign assistance programs in countries around the world, and we are now seeing China move in and taking over those programs in ways that not only affect our ability to get that information, but our national security. I often think that if you can't get people to do something for the right reason, because it's the moral thing to do, sometimes you can get people to do something because it's cost effective to do that. And Dr. Esham, in New Hampshire, we are developing a real biomedical industry in our state. That's important to local economies throughout the state. They're jobs that fuel our small towns and cities. They are partnering with institutions like Dartmouth and the University of New Hampshire on breakthroughs. And can you talk, I thought you were very effective in talking about the role of the FDA, but can you talk about what stability at the FDA and NIH means as we're looking at getting private investors to invest in growth around the country? Certainly in our small towns in New Hampshire, those private investments have been critical as we've looked at how to build this industry.
Thank you for that question, and I want to say also congratulations. I have long been a supporter of the proliferation of things like biotechnology in the biopharmaceutical industry across the country, and it's very exciting to see what's going on in your state.
It is.
They're great jobs.
Thank you.
It's a great community. I think, it's in the title, right? It's the biomedical research ecosystem. And so you have foundational research that lead to, help us understand the underlying foundational causes of disease. That leads us to understand about new targets, new endpoints, new ways to look at diseases, new ways to think about patient-driven medicines. And then that information and that knowledge is transferred into a clinical trial system where the biopharmaceutical company, and again, a lot of them are the small companies that you talk about in your state, are really taking that and doing the cutting-edge research. Now, in order for them, they are often pre-revenue. They do not have any money. They're not making anything on the market. They are on the edge of discovery, of next-generation medical interventions. And what they need is a ability to understand that the regulatory agency is capable, has the expertise required to evaluate on a scientifically based foundation how to evaluate the safety and efficacies of these medicines. And they need to understand that they have the capacity to move things forward in a timely manner, even if it's a no. A timely no is better than a long limbo period. That has profound impacts on the private investment community. And money is global. And so I think we have to be realistic about that. So the stronger the FDA here is in the United States, the more we can keep building biotech hubs like in your state.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I hope you feel like you heard a lot of support, bipartisan support on this committee for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Senator Durbin.
Madam Chair, thanks for this historic hearing. There are those of us who are concerned about this issue, but you used your authority as chair of the Appropriations Committee to draw us together and to tell this story to a much larger audience, so thank you very much for that. Mrs. Emily Stenson, that daughter of yours is amazing. She gets a special congressional medal for putting up with so much political speech, so many political speeches from this side. If you've ever been a parent sitting in a doctor's office with a baby on your lap and heard those words that were earth-changing diagnoses, you knew your life would never be the same. And the questions that you would ask, and I've been there, the questions you would ask are pretty obvious. Is there a medicine? Is there a surgery? Is there a procedure? If not, is there a clinical trial? We all ask the same questions faced with this terrible challenge, praying to God that one of the answers is yes. And that's what this hearing is all about, to make sure that one of those answers is yes. It really makes all the difference in the world. So I will tell you that 10 years ago, I went out to the NIH and met with Francis Collins, who I consider to be a modern-day saint, and said to him, you'll appreciate this, Dr. Parikh, I can remember the time when a handful of legislators, Specter and Harkin and Porter, doubled the NIH budget. And I said to Dr. Collins, I don't think I can do that again. What can I do? He said, give us 5% real growth a year. And the researchers will be confident that next year is going to be a good year too, and they'll stick to their research and good things will happen. So I set out to do that, and the first person I visited was Patty Murray, who was a willing volunteer in that effort. And Roy Blunt, Republican senator from Missouri, who chaired the subcommittee, and then Lamar Alexander, another Republican senator from Tennessee. And we achieved not perfect 5% growth each year, but we went from a $30 billion budget in FY15 to NIH budget of $49.8 billion today, $49 billion today. 60% increase, 60%. The suggested change from the Trump administration and NIH will wipe out all of that. 10 years, 1 decade of work, bipartisan work to increase medical research across the United States. That's what's at stake here. That's what we're getting down to. I look at it and I think we haven't mentioned, but I want to mention the number of drugs that have been approved by the FDA in the last 2010 to 2019. 356 new drugs. You see them on television all the time. 356 new drugs. How many came out of NIH research? 354 of the 356. We got to make sure that that's part of the record as well. Their research leads to medicine that makes a difference. And that's what we're all fighting to make sure it continues. I also want to put in the record, Madam Chair, a statement from the Defense Health Research Consortium that talks about the Department of Defense medical research as well. It's focused primarily on veterans and members of the military, but it has many applications beyond. Traumatic brain injury, the research also affects epilepsy. So there are many different ways that these things can work together.
Without objection.
Thank you. I just want to close by saying that want to make America great again? Don't run away from that child sitting there at that table. Stick with the research at NIH that gives her hope. We can work together, and I think this hearing is a good indication there's strong bipartisan support for NIH. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Esham, I don't think anyone in this room has forgotten about the infant formula crisis of 2021 after the FDA inspection found that some infant formula products at Abbott's Sturgis, Michigan plant had been contaminated by Cronobacter, causing widespread panic and a nationwide shortage. The infant formula crisis alerted us to a very glaring issue that the FDA does not currently have the authority to inspect infant formula until after the product has left the manufacturer's control, which makes no sense. I've been working on legislation to provide this authority and recently introduced a bill that would require infant formula manufacturers to test for contaminants before releasing their product, which seems to make common sense. Last year, I asked former FDA Commissioner Dr. Robert Califf about the long-term effects of this legislation, should it go into effect, and its ability to test products early. He supported that effort. But my question for you is, given the terminations of scientists at the FDA food safety labs and the more recent decision to rehire several of these specialists on food-related illnesses, what value do these scientists bring to ensuring the safety of products, including infant formula?
Thank you for that question, and I think, the short answer is it's very important. I will say that our members have raised concerns about recent cuts and the impact it may have on the abilities labs to manage outbreak response functions, drug safety and quality. It is our understanding that some staff are being brought back to these labs, particularly in Chicago, which is responsible for the Grade A milk program, and in San Francisco, which does important work on avian flu testing in dairy products. But my members have also conveyed that there continues to be a need for support and resources to meet the Food Safety Modernization Act requirements. And I think that's going to be very important in terms of managing things like the infant formula issues. So again, I am happy to facilitate conversations with our members that are expert on that. But again, hopefully that gives you a picture of the importance.
Very good. We'll continue to have those conversations because it is incredibly important. I'm also very troubled by the firing and sudden rehiring of hundreds of scientists and inspectors at FDA medical products laboratories, including the lab in the city of Detroit. These labs don't just inspect food and medicines, they also make sure that the supplies in the strategic national stockpile are ready at a moment's notice if they are needed. So my question for you, Dr. Esham, is what impact are these reckless personnel actions having on the health of Americans and our national security?
Thank you for the question, and as I'll repeat some of the things that I said earlier, but it's certainly the case that the inspector's office has long been stretched, and in recent times we were getting close to, I think, getting a state where they could better manage and keep up with the workloads of domestic and foreign inspections. And while we do think that there's ways to think about how we can use innovative technologies to help streamline and lessen the burden of inspections both here and around the world, that is certainly of concern. Again, in our letter that we sent to this committee, we did express our concerns about the volumes of layoffs, and certainly we had the Office of the Inspectorate in mind. As I said, I think we were heartened to hear during our conversations with the Commissioner on Monday that they are carefully looking across all of the recent employment decisions to determine what functions are critical to be brought back, and I'm going to presume that that's on that list. And so we hope to continue to work with you and the Commissioner to ensure that the FDA has the resources it needs to, again, to protect the health by its ability to conduct timely and important inspections.
Which always has to be our number one priority. So appreciate working with you. Dr. Parikh, I recently spoke with the University of Michigan's president and vice president for research to learn about the impact of recent changes to the federal health enterprise, and I remain concerned about the future of innovation at our country's leading research universities. Like its counterparts nationwide, the University of Michigan is being forced to adapt to major policy changes all at once, putting significant stress on the research enterprise focused on innovation as well as bettering patients' lives. My team recently met with a group of graduate students from the University of Michigan as well as Michigan State that were participating in the AAAS Catalyzing Advocacy in Science and Engineering workshop, which you're familiar with. During the meeting, the students stressed that these major policy changes are diminishing opportunities for the next generation of scientists and researchers that we are going to count on to provide the innovation and help that they can deliver. So my question for you, doctors, do you echo these concerns, and could you elaborate on it?
Excuse me. Time has expired on the vote on the floor, so I'm going to ask the witness to respond for the record and apologize, although you got your full amount of time. We are going to have to close out the hearing because the floor is calling for all of us to come and vote. But I wanted to thank everyone for being here, particularly an incredibly patient and well-behaved Charlie, who hasn't made a peep through the whole hearing. You know, I was struck in listening to the exchanges today that this is a matter of such passion for all of us. And the reason is that each and every one of us has had a loved one or experienced personally an illness or a condition that biomedical research is helping to find a means of prevention for, or more effective treatments, or one day, in the case of Alzheimer's, for example, a cure. And that's why it is so important, because the debate over funding for scientific research is ultimately a debate about lives that will be saved and enhanced by the cures and therapies discovered in America's labs and universities. And that's why it's so important that we preserve and strengthen our system of scientific research and innovation, and why it is such a high priority. There are many issues that were raised today that we will follow up with our witnesses and all of the advocacy groups that are out there. The record will remain open until Friday, May 9th at 6 p.m. for senators who wish to submit any questions for the record. In addition, the committee has received a number of letters and written testimony for the record. All of those will be included in the record without objection, and any members who wish to submit additional materials can do so up to that deadline. Again, thank you all for being here. I do want to turn to the Vice Chair for her closing remarks as well.
Thank you very much, Chair Collins. And I have approximately 36 statements here from outside organizations in support of NIH that I would like to submit for the record.
Without objection.
And I really want to thank you for this really critical hearing. I really appreciate the opportunity for all of us to talk about these critical federal investments in medical research and how it pays off for our economy and our global competitiveness and for our children, families, and all the patients and providers who are out there. So I really look forward to our next conversation. I hope we can bring in Trump officials to our next one so that we can share our grave concerns with them. I think it's important to say that there is a reason that NIH is referred to as one of our nation's crown jewels. It is a source not just of great value, but of national pride and hope. Hope is the word we have heard continuously throughout this entire hearing. So it is absolutely critical that we move forward quickly. And this committee's got a lot of work ahead of us to make sure that we don't lose that hope for so many families. And I, too, echo real thanks to Charlie for being the most patient 5-year-old I have ever met. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This hearing is now adjourned.